Good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for this professional development opportunity. I am Christy Blewett. I'm honored and excited to be NCEA's facilitator for today's webinar, Enhancing Student Flourishing, Integrating Cognitive, Social, and Emotional Well-Being in Catholic Education. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items to note. First, this session is being recorded and will soon be available on ncea.org through your membership portal for future reference. Next, we welcome your thoughts. Please submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box. We will actively monitor the Q&A box and do our best to respond before the end of today's time. Finally, stay tuned. Once our presenters have concluded, a link to our online survey, along with instructions on how to obtain a certificate of completion for this webinar, will be shared. So welcome to the second of 3 webinars hosted by the Roche Center in partnership with NCEA, featuring the Whole Child Education Playbook, which was published this spring. Designed with educators in mind, the playbook offers a wealth of practical resources for practitioners. Authored by Drs. Melody Wittenbach, Molly McMahon, John Reyes, Michael Boyle, Katie Ward, and Victoria Burgess, the playbook emerged from a national convening at Boston College in 2022, where 55 scholars, philanthropists, and practitioners gathered to explore whole child education and its distinct connection to Catholic education. The result is a comprehensive framework and shared definition to guide whole child education in U.S. Catholic schools. Now let's meet the host of our panel for today. Welcome to Dr. Molly McMahon, the Director of Leadership Programs at the Roche Center, bringing over a decade of experience as a principal and assistant principal. She played a pivotal role in implementing social-emotional learning across elementary schools in Chelmsford Public Schools, where she also developed a district-wide social-emotional behavioral therapeutic program. Molly earned her doctorate in educational leadership from Boston College, where she researched urban parent engagement and supervised student teachers. Passionate about the intersection of leadership, SEL, and school climate, she is dedicated to fostering positive, thriving learning communities. Dr. McMahon, thank you so much for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christy, for that wonderful introduction. Much appreciated. And just a huge thank you to NCA for hosting us today. Thank you also to the amazing guests that you're about to hear from on this panel who have extensive knowledge of this work and have all been involved in this playbook in some way, shape, or form. And finally, thank you to all of you that are here today listening. Your presence here is a testament to your dedication to the holistic education of the youth entrusted in our care in our Catholic schools. So as Christy said, this second webinar will focus on the academic, social, and emotional domains of our framework. And if you tuned in last week, there was a focus on the spiritual domain as well as the core values. There will also be another upcoming webinar in 2 weeks with some other pieces as well of our framework. So before I get started with introducing the incredible guests that we have on the webinar, I want to introduce you a little bit to our playbook, but also the impetus to the urgency of this work. And so I just want to get started with a brief introduction from our playbook that I think really will speak to all of us in terms of the urgency of this work at this moment. American youth are growing up in a nation contending with enduring repercussions emanating from a global pandemic, climatic disruptions, economic instability, tumultuous political dynamics, and recurrent incidents of mass violence. These multifaceted stressors, compounded by their enduring consequences, have exacerbated the physical, emotional, social, and psychological burdens that numerous students were already contending with prior to the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given that educational institutions serve as microcosms of broader society, students with intricate needs are enrolling in classrooms, thereby molding our interactions with both students and colleagues, influencing pedagogical methodologies and concurrently shaping the prevailing ethos within our educational settings. This results within schools has engendered an escalating imperative to provide comprehensive support to children across the spectrum of their existence, encompassing not only cognitive facets, but also social, emotional, physical, and spiritual dimensions. And so this is where we begin our work and our framework. And as Christy said, this came out of the work of many people that we want to thank. And just to kind of orient us to this framework before we get started with our guests, um, at the center of this framework, of course, we place the sacredness of each and every child entrusted in our care. The arrows encircling the child at the center of the framework signify the perpetual interaction of all domains in the learner's experience. Even when focused on the development of a specific domain, the entirety of the framework's domains remain interconnected, exerting mutual influence on one another. The inclusion of those dotted lines are purposeful, underscoring that interconnectedness of those domains. The comprehensive development of a child necessitates that educators contemplate this intersectionality and this interdependence of all the domains, along with the underlying beliefs and the contributions within the learner's ecosystem that shape a child's development. So as you'll see at the foundation on the left is the core beliefs that substantiate this work, and these convictions find their origin in our Catholic faith. On the right side, you'll see it acknowledges the diverse array of agents and influencers that contribute to a child's developmental trajectory, denoted as the ecosystem of the learner. Knowing that those surrounding factors make up the ecosystem of the learner, delineating its impact on a child's spiritual, physical, emotional, social, and cognitive development. In other words, we can't do it alone. We can do something really well in schools, but we can't do it alone. And so it's important to acknowledge those pieces. And so today, for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be exploring specifically the three domains: the cognitive, the social, and the emotional. So I'll get started with the cognitive. So for us, the cognitive domain of whole child education refers to the development of intellectual abilities, thinking skills, and knowledge acquisition. It involves critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and acquisition of academic knowledge in various subjects. Cognitive development promotes curiosity, intellectual exploration, and the ability to analyze, evaluate, and apply knowledge to real-life situations. We will also be exploring the emotional domain today. The emotional domain of whole child education refers to the development of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and emotional well-being. It involves recognizing and managing one's own emotions, understanding the emotions of others, and developing skills for building healthy relationships. Emotional development fosters empathy, resilience, self-regulation, and the ability to navigate and express emotions in healthy and constructive manners. And finally, the social domain is one of whole child that focuses on the development of social skills, interpersonal relationships, and a sense of social responsibility. It involves communication skills, collaboration, empathy, cultural competence, and an understanding of social dynamics. Social development promotes positive relationships, cooperation, respect for diversity, and the ability to contribute to the well-being of communities and to society. As you can see, we could probably spend an entire webinar and more on each of these domains. And so today we're going to just give you a taste of what you can find in this playbook on each of these domains. So as we begin, I'm so grateful for the guests that are here with me today on this webinar with their incredible knowledge and the practical applications that they're going to have for you. As you saw in the title of this webinar, we are looking to elevate the voices of the people that have been involved in this playbook, practitioners, researchers, et cetera, who have really brought this together. So with that said, we've got Mike Boyle here. He serves as the Executive Director of the Herman Center for Innovative Catholic Education at the School of Education at St. Louis University. Dr. Boyle brings a rich educational background, including roles as Superintendent of Catholic Schools, previously the Director of the Andrew M. Greeley Center for Catholic Education at Loyola University Chicago, a Catholic school principal, school psychologist, and special education administrator. He was responsible for writing the social domain chapter of this playbook. We also have Leticia Oseguera, and she is currently the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of San Diego. She has 19 years of bilingual education experience, 5 years as the principal of the only Catholic school in San Diego with a dual language program, and 14 years previous to that teaching experience at the high school level in both public and Catholic schools. She is the former principal of a dual immersion school in our Roche Center twin network of schools, which is also featured in our playbook. And finally, Dr. Kelly O'Leary teaches in the Social and Emotional and Academic Leadership Doctoral Program at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. Dr. O'Leary has been a school administrator in New Haven, Connecticut at St. Martin de Porres, a Nativity Miguel Coalition school since 2008. She was featured in the emotional domain chapter of the Whole Child Education Playbook. So as you can see, we're in very good hands today with all that we will be exploring. So given our time today, I am going to begin to jump right in with some questions to get us started. So Mike, I'd like to turn to you first. So through your work as a school counselor, a principal, a superintendent, and directors of different centers of research, you have both experienced in practice and also research the inexplicable links between emotional well-being, social connectedness, and of course, cognitive engagement, right? So we know these domains are completely intertwined. So can you talk a little bit on a kind of broader level, how the cognitive, social, and emotional domains, how they're significant on their own, but also how they interrelate on a broader level?
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I think unfortunately, sometimes when we get into models, we start to think that each one of these things is very separate. And in fact, they really interact with each other. I think that all of us probably can testify to the fact that because they do interact with each other, we can't just take a really a focused view on one of these aspects. So a lot of times when we talk about like the cognitive side, we think about, just sort of the academic piece. But I think we all have examples of when kids do not have things working for them. There's other stressors that are going on in their life. That they're not available for the cognitive piece. I know for me, I did the chapter on the social domain, and certainly I think we need to pay attention to those social relationships because we know certainly we've seen plenty of evidence, related to bullying and things like that, is that when kids are having sort of those psychosocial stressors in their life, um, they're not available to learn. So I think it's really critical to be able to think about all these different pieces are not just separate, but they're really all directly related to each other and interact with each other. I think I want to just kind of pull out a quote that I actually started the social chapter with, and this comes from Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium. He says, "Today more than ever, we need men and women who, on the basis of their experiencing of accompanying others, are familiar with the processes that call for prudence, understanding, patience, and docility of spirit." And again, I think that's a real critical piece, and it kind of gets back to our roots as Catholic educators, really talking about those virtues, right? And there was a lot of wisdom in the sort of the genesis of Catholic education and thinking about really all of these different domains and sort of the interaction between these, because if we work on those pieces, then that really allows us to be able to accompany others, to walk with others.
Yeah, thank you. That idea of accompaniment is so important. And I think, as you said, it's the origin of Catholic education. This has always been the way that we have educated our students. I think, interestingly, recently, so much has come out from the science of learning, right? That literally learning is cognitive, social, and emotional. There is nothing disconnected about it, right? Our emotions connect to our learning, that social interaction, our feelings of trust and safety. So yeah, thank
And,
you.
and, and sometimes we get hijacked, right, about achievement. We get so focused on test scores. I mean, how many of us all have had experiences that when those ACT scores or other standardized test scores come out, the phones are ringing. What did your kid get? And we focus so much on the cognitive, that piece, but we forget a lot of those other pieces about being kind. How do we interact with others? And those are just as important, if not more important, for those things. So again, I think that again, it strikes an argument for what we do in Catholic education, which is really to look at all of these pieces in balance.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point, right? It's a both and, not an either or,
Mhm.
right? We can't let that pendulum swing too far in education. Thank you. Leticia, in our cognitive chapter, we feature twin dual language schools. And as your role as superintendent, right? And previously as a principal supervising teachers, right? Oftentimes when we go into classrooms, we can confuse compliance with engagement. And engagement, we know, means that students are carrying that cognitive load, they're making those meanings and those connections to what they're learning and real world problems. And so student engagement practices are a pedagogical means in which students can feel connected, present, and seen. Can you talk a little bit about the cognitive engagement and the ways that the San Diego schools or the twin schools engage students meaningfully to meet those cognitive needs?
Yes, Molly, thank you. So we used to think of engaged classrooms as quiet classrooms where the teacher is on stage delivering the instruction and students are passively receiving information, maybe taking notes, listening to the teacher. However, this is not engagement. This is compliance. And in order to ensure that our students are actively learning, that they are truly engaged, then we want to see active participation in learning. We want to see them doing most of the work in the classroom. We want to see them engaged in critical thinking and in application of knowledge. So I'll provide an example from our diocese and an example from the Twin Network to give you all an idea of what this can look like, both in the classroom at that individual classroom level and then at a diocesan level. And so thinking about engagement at the diocesan level post-pandemic, we at the Diocese of San Diego have been focusing the last few years on Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. And one of the main elements is incorporating multiple means of engagement, which include providing choices in learning activities, offering opportunities for collaboration, and incorporating relevant and authentic content. And so as a diocese, we have 2 professional learning days per year where we bring together all of our Catholic school educators. And it's a sort of conference style setting. And so we've been very intentional in selecting keynote speakers that focus on these cognitive engagement strategies, and then having choices within the sessions for participants that then go deeper into what can this look like at my classroom level for my 4th grade students, for my math students. So then focusing on their subject level or on their subject or their grade level. And so making sure that as a diocesan leader, then we're intentional in selecting this focus and that it's carried through for a variety of years, not just, right, a one and done, we do it this year and that's it, and assuming that everybody is knowledgeable and aware and able to implement it, but more of a holistic approach to this professional learning. And from the Twin Network, I just want to highlight a couple of examples of these cognitive engagement strategies. And the one that I want to highlight first has to do with high expectations for all students. Because a lot of times, especially working with our students from marginalized backgrounds, and our Twin Networks, we're working with students who are learning another language. And we have native English speakers, we have native Spanish speakers, but thinking of our Latino population, and sometimes we can, as educators, it can be easy for us to use the pobrecito syndrome and say, right, pobrecito, they need help, poor child, let me make this easier for them. And so just a reminder that we don't want to do that, right? That we want to challenge our students academically, that they are capable, that they can do great, hard things. And so as educators, we want to challenge them so that they can achieve that academic excellence. And just the second strategy I want to highlight here is collaborative learning. And it's an essential element in our dual language classrooms because our students need to be able to work together, to speak to one another, to use each other as a resource for learning the language and the content within that language, but also is a high leverage strategy that can be used in any classroom, regardless of program or model. And so just remembering that even at the classroom level, if I select collaborative strategies, then my students are engaging cognitively at a different level than if they're just sitting down at their desk listening to the teacher.
Yeah, amazing. I love first that you highlighted that your professional development is a model for how teachers learn, which then helps teachers model how students should be learning, right? So, just a beautiful example. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of those high expectations. We definitely need to make sure that we are keeping those expectations high. And that is when we put the cognitive load on students, right? As a former principal, I used to always say to my staff, I hope that while you're planning, the cognitive load is on you. But once we're in the lesson, I hope that cognitive load is on students. And even just collaborative learning, right? Again, that's a connection right to the social domain, right? We've got to come up with those critical thinking skills and those communication skills to be able to work with others, which we know is part of everyone's job every single day for life. So thank you. Great examples. Kelly, I'm going to turn to you for the emotional domain. So in addition to being the principal at St. Martin de Porres and Nativity Miguel Coalition Middle School, as I said in the beginning, Kelly has extensive background in emotional well-being and trauma-informed practices. She teaches a course on this. So Kelly, can you talk a little bit about the specific practices that your school puts in place, right? So we'll take it from the research course, right? But what actually happens to meet those emotional needs of students each and every day?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Molly, again, for having me here. So, emotions are messy, right? They're messy, and schools are stressful places to be. They're stressful for kids, they're stressful for adults. And so I think when we zoom out about practices, we have to think about how do we help make schools places of healing? How do we help make schools places of healing? How do we help reduce the dose of adversity? How do we help reduce the toxic stress? And toxic stress is everywhere. How do we help make it a safe space? And so we know the brain science is that we have to get that frontal lobe back online. We have to, address the fight or flight that's happening. And in a school, how you do this is by helping students regulate. And so this is called co-regulation and with emotions. And just like you can't physically teach a 1-year-old how to walk by putting their foot in front of each other, you create the space, the guardrails to help that 1-year-old figure it out. So co-regulation is really helping students figure out how to manage their emotions. And much of this emotions management instruction happens in a proactive way that addresses the brain science, which we say to mitigate toxic stress, you have to build trust. If you want to reduce the dose of adversity, you have to build trust. And the only way to do that is to do that with healthy buffering adults. And so working with those adults with students. And so in every classroom, we have a minimum of 2 adults. And some classrooms, we have 3 adults. And so that student-teacher ratio is super small, very important. Then we go to the brain science on PTSD. If we were to write a prescription for PTSD, what do you do in terms of having that toxic stress? One of the first things would be exercise and helping kids move. My school day is a very long day. It's a 10-hour school day. But by 2:30, kids have been outside 3 times already. In and out, up and down the stairs. Movement is so important. This is where the intention of movement, overrides the, oh my gosh, teacher's feeling not another transition. But the kids need to move, okay? Having time outside gives kids a whole brain experience. And so what trauma and stress does is fractures our experience. And being able to be outside gives our brain that whole experience and grounding. Mental health support's really important. We have at least 2 social workers in the building, to 3, and they do a lot of push and support. Their entire goal is to help kids have a better day. And they are in classrooms, they are in the hallway, they are in the stairwells, they are out at recess, they are at lunch. They are very much embedded in everyday school life. They are not sequestered. They're not pulling kids out for only one-on-ones. They're very much a part of it. And so we provide a lot of opportunities for adults to build healthy relationships with kids. And kids need a lot of different adults to interact with and a lot of different adults to see them in different areas. In addition, mindfulness is really important. That's part of that prescription. Mindfulness paired with prayer is incredible. One of the best tools of mindfulness is just breathing. So imagine just breathing in for 3 deep breaths, breathing in God's light and breathing out God's peace. And that, in terms of mindfulness and grounding, is so powerful. And so utilizing prayer. In addition, we have a silent sanctuary that is staffed by a teacher. And so students can elect to go for 10 minutes and have, the idea of silence is that undoing the myth that the teacher does not have to be a therapist. That's not the goal of the Science Sanctuary. The goal of the Science Sanctuary is to get your frontal lobe back online, be able to manage your emotions, and do that with a trusted adult. And so that may be a balloon toss. That may be, tracking with a marker. That may be a lot of different activities that you could choose from, or that might be just sitting and kind of playing with the sandbox, and that's okay. We have a non-punitive discipline system. So we have accountability, but without that punishment. And all of this has to be wrapped in really high engagement, joyful enrichment activities. Okay, you cannot build those castle core competencies without doing something. So we can't talk about it in a classroom. And so we have to be out doing something in a low stakes engagement. So those low stakes engagement tasks are things like bowling and ice skating and these fun, joyful experiences where the whole school community or a whole classroom can come together and build trust together with teachers. And that I think is really, really important. And our last piece is we have a student-centered meeting with every student-facing staff member every week. And I will tell you, it changes the way you work with students when we can have a very honest conversation about students and what is getting in their way, because we believe that kids do well if they can. And if they're not doing well, something is getting in the way. And it's our job as the adults to clear away those barriers.
That's amazing. Thank you. I have so much to say about that. I think you said a few things that have really come up in terms of, like, again, the science of learning. You've said movement, you've said outdoors, and you've said joy. And I think in schools, we often forget some of these things. Again, we get caught up in time and pressure, and we forget that we are developing a whole person. So thank you. And I also, once again, bringing up how we train adults in order to work with kids, right? That once a week meeting with staff to support them in working with kids. I mean, how powerful. So that's awesome. Do you have like a specific, obviously without names, but a specific student you can think of that these practices have helped transform the way that they learn?
Oh, absolutely. I have a whole list of students. I guess the one that comes to mind was a student that was incredibly reactive. Actually, anytime his name was called, he would flip out. I wasn't doing anything, wasn't me. It didn't even matter if you were calling him up to get a piece of paper or whatever, he would flip out. And so in that Friday meeting, we discussed, gosh, what can we do? And we figured out that proximity was really important, and don't use his name. His name is triggering him. And he is a kid that is trying so hard to do well and keeps, in his mind, getting into trouble again and again and again. And so once we were able to help figure out what was causing this, and we made a pact as a staff that we were not going to address him from across the room. We were going to be in 3 feet, radius to him. These were conversations that were so rich that student, we follow kids through high school and college. That kid is now a freshman in college, UConn, and thriving and wants to go into education. So these are the stories of parents of students who have gotten into fights in terms of growing, throughout this time. It changes the way we think about what it means to be in trouble. Like, the whole goal is we want our students to get it within these 4 walls. Okay, and to make those mistakes when it's messy and we can figure it out together, and to not wait to try to be the most perfect person and not wait to make those mistakes outside. Make them now. Let's figure it out when there's the opportunity and the buffer to help support them.
Beautiful. I love it. Make the mistakes now while you're in a safe space. I love it. Thank you. So Mike, I know I had asked you a little bit broad level, but now I'd like to get into the social domain with you. So a major part of this work in the social domain chapter is supporting connectedness and belonging, right? So we know that that's a major component of mental well-being and academic achievement when you feel connected and you feel like you belong. Recently we've had a lot come out. Surgeon General's report on the mental health crisis has equated the health risk of a lack of social connectedness to, they've connected it to being like smoking up to 12 cigarettes a day. That's how bad it is for your health to not be connected to another person. So we know that there's nothing more important than making sure that our youth are connected and that they feel that they belong. Can you talk a little bit about some of the best practices that you've seen schools doing or have you been part of to ensure that students feel connected?
Sure. Kelly just mentioned a lot of it. It's the relationship, right? And it's not only the relationship for the kids, it's also the relationship for the adults. So when we're talking about all of this, let's not just sequester and look only at kids. Let's look at all of us. So, you know, when there's a behavioral incident, right? Kind of a not following of expectations and things. It harms, it ruptures the relationship. And part of this, and again, Kelly, I love hearing, you talk about like, okay, it's not just about like rules and expectations, right? It's about here's what we do, and we've got to think about repairing. When there's a disruption in the relationship, we have to think about repairing, kind of a reconciliation, obviously not a sacramental reconciliation, but we have to think about reconciliation. How do we fix this? And places that I've seen, places that I've been, it's really powerful that when a behavioral incident occurs, we have to acknowledge and recognize the disruption in the relationship. And if we don't fix that, it comes back and it usually does irreparable harm. And by the way, it probably causes more behavioral disruption. So we have to think about, in all of this and in all the work that we do, how do we go about repairing? And sometimes it's as simply as talking to the kid, listen, we had a thing happen between the two of us, made you feel upset, made me feel upset. I got to acknowledge how I feel as an adult. We've got to fix this because we're working together now for the rest of the school year. So what are we going to do to fix this? And again, it's not just I'm sorry. Okay, yes, it's acknowledgement, but what do we know? We have to talk about how are we going to fix this? What are we going to do to make this better between the two of us? And Kelly, again, another great example in terms of like what your staff did is that you figured out like, oh my gosh, if we have to, if we call his name, this is what's going to happen. But being able to acknowledge that, right? So we see, here's what happens when this occurs. So here are the behaviors we're going to change, right? Here are the behaviors you're going to change. And then, so that we can continue to do the work of schooling. Again, this is not just about, again, cognitive domain, absolutely very important, but we get so wrapped up into the cognitive domain, we forget about who we are as Catholic educators. And it's about maintaining the relationship. In any of the relationships that any of us have, right? There's always ups and downs. So when we have the down, what do we do to get ourselves back on track? And so I think that's the challenge. How do we think about that with our students? How do we think about repairing when things aren't going the way that we want to do? So, so that's an important, I guess, challenge, I think, for everybody that's on this call today. And so thinking about that one kid that really drives me crazy, what am I going to do so that we can fix this? And I have her icon right on my wall in my office, is thinking about Blessed Dorothy Day, right? The quote that actually stops me a lot because I don't live up to this and I wish I did. And so I always have to think about that. But she is quoted as saying, you only love God as much as you love the person you like the least. Yikes, right? That's really powerful, right? Because I think about that kid, and we've all had those kids that really just drive me crazy and get under my skin, and I get angry, right? It's at that point you have to challenge yourself because God is in all of us, right? And we see the face of God in all of us. So if I'm not engaged in that part of maintaining a wonderful and good relationship with that kid, that's the point that I love God you know, and so I have to think about, okay, even when I'm angry. Now, as a former school psychologist, I've worked in programs with kids with significant emotional behavioral disorders, you know, kids that were physically acting out, aggressing towards adults. Okay, I've been there. Hard to love somebody who's ready to throw a chair at you, right? So, but that's the part we got to get through that. But I've got to come back. I've got to repair my relationship with that person, that kid, and think, okay, how am I going to fix this, right? So it's not just the kid fixing it, but I have to think about what do I do and how do I own that? So again, I'm not saying this stuff is easy at all. This is really hard. Again, I still have issues with like, okay, when I get angry, you know, it's at that point, how much do I really love God, right? So again, I think it's probably a lifelong challenge that we need to think about and how to do that. So that's probably a challenge to take maybe for today, is that, you know, thinking about Blessed Dorothy Day, how much, you know, I love God as much as I love the person that I like the least.
Man, that's a good challenge for Lent, Mike.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
know.
Awesome. Well, thank you each for kind of taking a little part of each domain. And now I'm going to ask a few questions and I'll just open it up to whoever wants to unmute and answer, and then the next person can add on. And this is kind of a great continuation to what Mike was just talking about. So we all know from research and what's coming out is just that relationship-centered schools. So again, schools that connect student to student, student to teacher, student to administrator, teacher to family, administrator to family, family to pastor, pastor to student, right? And on and on and on. We know that those relationship-centered schools are the ones that are the most successful at reaching students academically, with attendance, and also with a positive school culture. So again, I'll open it up to anybody. What are some of the ways that you've seen Catholic schools doing this great work around the country?
Well, I can jump in as a school principal. It's really important. We have a principal president model. The president opens the school every day. I am in the parking lot closing the school every day. So this idea of being present and communicating care. We know that the building blocks of trust are communicating care. And so how do we communicate care? And we communicate care by knowing the parents, knowing the kids. And I think the important piece of building trust, it's easy to build trust with kids. It's harder to build trust with parents. However, you are missing 50% of the growth that could happen if you have not spent the time in building trust with parents. And so this happens by, you know, every parent wants to know that you love their kid, that you want what's best for them, and you're not out to get them. And so you are here in terms of supporting them. So we have to message that over and over and over again, and not only when there's a problem. We have to be able to be in communication and in relationship when there's not a problem. So having these opportunities where we can experience joy together, you know, I think that's really, really important as the building blocks of trust.
Yeah, by being present, right? I used to say that, you know, as a former Catholic school principal, I think one of the best parts of my day was doing a morning arrival, because I was out in the parking lot opening doors. And it was interesting because you could check, you could get a sense of, okay, well, who's having a little difficulty today? And then I can just pull them aside, check in, like, how you doing? You know, what are we going to need to do to get off to a really good start to the day? And it's that relationship, it's that check-in and being present, I think, was a really, I think, an effective kind of intervention strategy for me.
Yeah, and just to add on, yes, absolutely, in terms of that welcoming and then that departure time. As a principal, I always welcome the kids with a message of welcome. I'm so happy that you're here today. And right, in Spanish, I would say, mis queridos estudiantes, right? Like, my lovely students, I love you. I'm here for you. And every day it was this positive message of welcoming them to school, knowing that they matter and that we want to see them in our schools and in our classrooms. And then at the end of the day, I would always close with, remember to always be kind, always try your best, and treat everyone with dignity and respect. And I think that that leads us to this idea that I think in our Catholic schools, we do so well of seeing God in each other. And so then sharing this idea with our students, right, of we are one. And so we are going to build a community, build a family within the four walls of our classroom. As a teacher, I'm going to focus on not only developing a relationship with my students, but helping them develop relationships with each other so that that trust can build within the classroom, and so that they know that there's other people that they can rely on beyond the teacher. As a principal, then I want to make sure that I'm also developing relationships with the teachers, with the faculty and staff. And so being intentional about community building with the staff, showing them how much we appreciate and we value them. And most of us have been teachers and we know how hard that job is. And so we want to make sure that our teachers know that they are valued and appreciated, and that we're building in that time to spend together, to be together in community, and either, right, just do silly things together or engage in deep reflection activities around our vocations, etc. But being intentional about that time to connect with one another.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. If anyone on the call is looking for like something that could help structure what everyone is saying, I know CASTLE, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, has this neat way of thinking about it, of welcoming rituals, engaging practices, and then intentional closures. And it's just a beautiful way to think about how you want to set up your day with your students or your class if you're high school or secondary. But also they have a great document that talks about how you do this with adults to build that trusting relationship among them. And then thank you too, Kelly, a great reminder in terms of with parents. You know, we can't forget them because it really makes a difference. When kids know you are connected to the parents, that makes all the difference. So wonderful. So I know that our session today is really on the social, emotional, and academic, but again, we're in Catholic schools, so I can't not ask this question, right? So, and again, I'm going to toss this out and you can go in whatever order you want, but what are some of the ways in which the theological or spiritual aspects of our Catholic schools contribute to the social, emotional learning of students? And honestly, the reverse. How does kind of putting social, emotional learning practices in place, how does that contribute to our Catholic faith and identity?
I'm good to jump in again. All right.
Perfect.
So in terms of, we really believe, the Catholic schools are not just about teaching kids about God. I really believe that they're about giving kids an experience of God. And this reminder of this unconditional love, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, and there is nothing you can do to ever sever that unabiding love of God. And that, I think, is, how we message that, and, being present, that journeying with, that accompaniment, really, really important. And, we have up on our wall, not the Dorothy Day quote, but love me when I deserve it the least, because that's when I need it the most. And so really understanding like that iceberg of emotion, and that anger is a masking emotion, and there's so much underneath, and really, not taking everything at face value. But that just goes back to the God in me, the God in you, and together, that beautiful, that namaste of that together, when you're in that place, I'm in that place, we are one. And so that is really important when we think about, the dignity and worth and the spirituality, and how we, give kids an experience of God.
Well, I think also too, it's about that repairing, right? And that it's positive, regard that we always will hold people, and that mirrors the positive regard that we get from God, right? And that, okay, we're human, so we're going to make mistakes. We're going to get angry. We're going to do whatever, but it's how do we go about and repair that? I think that again points us back to that spiritual piece, that it's that kind of unconditional positive regard. Whatever, we could get mad at each other, but you know what, we still love and we still care for you, and that is an incredible message. And again, it's a hard one, right? I mean, because let's be honest, there are kids, that, will really press our own buttons. And it makes it difficult, but that's where we got to work on ourselves. And think about how we're going to do this. So we can fix it, because we've got to fix and repair the relationship somehow, because we continue to need to work together in terms of doing the business of school.
Yeah, and I think I'll just go back to this idea of we are one, of, again, recognizing the humanity, I think, in each other, whether it's our students or our colleagues or parents. And I think that, again, that is what's beautiful about our Catholic schools, that we are able to pause, and obviously, yes, we're not perfect and we have moments of difficult conversations, but learning to pause and to reflect and to go back to who are we as a community of faith, and how can we support one another, and how can we try to find solutions together. I think a lot of times also as leaders, we make the mistake of thinking that we have all the solutions. And I think our Catholic schools, our Catholic faith remind us that that is not the case, that again, we are here for one another, and that we can collaboratively find a solution with teachers, with parents, with students. I think student voice is super important. And I think that, especially, again, going back to our marginalized communities, where sometimes they don't have a voice. And so including families, including students as part of that solution just empowers all of us and just makes our schools stronger, builds trust, and allows us to just do more.
Yeah, thank you to all of you. Beautiful. And thanks for that reminder too, Leticia, of just leadership, right? And that can be leadership at all levels, whether it's student leadership or it's teacher leadership or it's building leadership or it's diocesan leadership, but that we have the power to create community. And when we create community, we can basically get through anything, right? So thank you. That's awesome. All right. Another one that I'm going to bump to any of you, right? So we know that a major part of a student's ability to learn is connected to their prior knowledge and their connections to previous learning. And we also now know from the science of learning that a lot of this is connected to culturally responsive teaching. So have you seen any best practices in schools that support a diverse student body population by celebrating that uniqueness of all of God's creation that helps us with our academics, it helps us with our social development, it helps us with our emotions?
And so I'll go first on this one, just because I'm so passionate about dual language education, especially in our Catholic schools. And my sincere hope is that we continue to add dual language programs to our Catholic schools across our nation. And so I'm a huge supporter and advocate of, dual language education in our schools. But part of that comes from that experience that I had as a principal. Obviously, that I've had personal experiences with being an immigrant into this country, being a native Spanish speaker, and having to add English to my linguistic repertoire. And so I have lived the value of bilingual education and having your home language be affirmed, and to know that language is tied to identity. And so when we speak negatively of the home language, we're speaking negatively of the identity of the student. But as a principal of a dual language school, I was able to see it in my students once they got to 8th grade and they had to do their portfolio presentations, their Seal of Biliteracy pathway presentations. And they spoke about what was the impact of the dual language program, our Catholic school, our Catholic identity in you, in your life, and in your future. And almost all of them, regardless of their background, so whether they were native English speakers of a variety of ethnic and cultural backgrounds, or native Spanish speakers, again, of a variety of ethnic or cultural backgrounds, because not all of them are from Mexico, right? They all talked about the beauty of having a Catholic school that affirmed that piece of their identity, their faith, and affirmed their cultural identity, regardless of what that was. And especially for students who had started at other schools, they spoke about how I went to either a public or charter dual language school, but had to leave my faith at home. That didn't come to school with me. I had to leave it at home. Or I attended a traditional Catholic school and I had to leave my home language at home. I had to leave that piece of my identity at home. And here they felt loved and affirmed and valued for who they were as a whole person. And so they felt as though they could bring their whole self to school and again, feel valued and appreciated, and how they were able then to share that with other students who were different from them, yet shared this common identity now as bilingual, biliterate, multicultural students who were united by our Catholic faith. And so that was just beautiful to see.
Well, something we do at my school is at a Nativity Miguel Coalition school. We follow students. So we're middle school, grades 5 through 8, but we follow students through high school, college, and beyond. And so we're in our 20th year, and our first group of 10-year-olds are now 30, and we're still connected. And they are getting married, having babies, buying houses, going back to school. I mean, it's just been incredible, this journey. And, you know, I get to have this group of students that we don't ever lose, that they are our graduate support program continues to grow and grow. And has been an incredible aspect of our school.
But doesn't that speak to the power of being a Catholic school, right? I mean, the both of you have talked about, again, this is not about the connection between 8 and 3. This is about the connection as a community. I mean, how beautiful to have that anchor for them, you know, to be able to be that connected. And again, I mean, that depth is, I think, really admirable.
Absolutely. And it just connects all of these domains and this framework all together. So just thank you. Last question. And I'm going to ask you to kind of stick to one of your domains. So for Kelly, the emotional domain, for Mike, the social, and Leticia, the cognitive. So one resource that's available in this playbook that we really is our checklists. So these are based on essential elements, right? They take into consideration that there's multiple contexts of schools, age groups, et cetera. But these are some essential things that schools can be doing to put in place. We also purposely have them on a continuum, so it's not, you know, either you're doing it or you're not. And we really think that these are helpful in terms of pushing schools to sort of analyze their practices, take a look at a next step. They're not meant to be a deficit mindset. They're meant to be an asset mindset. And so I'm just wondering, and I'll go in order of Kelly, then Mike, then Leticia, if you can just talk about how, in looking at these checklists that are available in the playbook, how could you see these being valuable to a school community or in your settings?
Oh my gosh, I think they're a great start to a conversation. I think it helps to highlight what are the meaningful measures. You know, I could imagine putting these on big butcher block paper and seeing, you know, each indicator and having my staff go around and say, what does this look like or sound like in our building? To get an idea of very tangible, like, where do we fall on this indicator? And then having the conversation, okay, so where do we want to go next? And so I love that there are emotional classroom kind of indicators, but then also school-wide indicators. And so I would start on the school-wide, because as a community, that what are things we committing to together, and what do we already know? And that important piece, as we almost in a carousel going around. And I think when people, you know, understand and underscore, wow, I agree with that, or that redundancy is really important of this, what does this look like and sound like in our building? And that's the place to start. So this would be a part of one of our faculty meetings. And that's how I would use this to go, okay, now where do we want to grow to? If there's an indicator, wow, we are not doing what we want to do here, what could we do next? What would be our next steps? And make it so tangible, right? We're not pie in the sky. This is very tangible. What are the next steps? And it's get better at something each month or each year. Like take a little piece. And so I think that it's broken down into pieces, really helpful. And it has the different scopes of classroom versus school as well.
For me, I like the intentionality. If anybody knows my work and what I've done, related to disabilities, I love systems. And what these checklists do is they offer you a system that causes a framework for conversation. So it can't be just like, oh yeah, we believe in the social aspect. It very specifically says, here's how. And so it causes those conversations, and it will cause you to go deeper into the conversation.
Yes, I completely agree. I found the checklist simple yet powerful is how I would describe it. The statements are clear, and so they allow either the teacher to take the classroom level practices checklist and go through it and decide, okay, how am I doing in these? And then critically reflect on how can I do them better? Where do I need to improve? Or a principal, right? Like Kelly shared, doing it with their whole staff. I could do it with my leadership team. I could do it with grade level bands. I think that at that diocesan level, I could also have principals do it and share with one another. What did you notice about your school? What did you notice? And what are the areas that we have in common that we have identified that we want to grow in, where we could collaborate and work together and do something for our teachers in common. So I think it can really be used at all levels. So thank you for this.
Thank you. This is great. I'm glad that it's helpful, and we hope that it's helpful to all those out there listening. So we do have one question in the chat that I think was intended for Kelly, because she was the one that brought together prayer and meditation. But of course, Leticia or Mike, if you want to add anything in, please feel free. But the question is, do you have a specific format by which students engage in prayer and meditation that you find effective? So is there like a particular type, or has this just been something that you've developed over time?
So not a particular type. However, we do have a morning gathering where we have a God-centered message where we come together as a school community. And that happens every morning. And at morning gathering, we have a moment of silence. And what is said is, let's take a moment of silence to simply be, to rest in the knowledge that God loves us individually and unconditionally. And we have done intentional instruction in small groups on breathing. And so helping students, because it feels funny if you're, 10 years old, 12 years old, I'm gonna take some deep breaths by myself in this time. And so we've brought in somebody that worked with students in small groups to work with breathing. And then we do this as an entire school community. This is something, it also happens in classrooms, in terms of that prayer. But we ask kids to imagine, and this is in our silent sanctuary, a picture of a person in a palm, and having kids feel that they can just be held in the palm of God's hand. And so that's how we have utilized prayer and breathing together.
That's awesome. Thank you. There was one more question in the chat about parent engagement. I apologize to Liz that we are running out of time. My email is on this last slide. And so I welcome anyone that wants to reach out with more questions. I can certainly get you connected to some of our speakers if needed, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to just go ahead and wrap us up here. So just once again, thank you to NCEA for hosting us and for this thoughtful publication strategy of thinking about hosting these webinars so we could expose people to elements of the book. Thank you to each of you, Leticia, Mike, and Kelly. Just your sharing of wisdom and practical application. I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of emails asking to connect with you all. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to all of our guests for taking the time to be here today. So just again, you can purchase the playbook directly from the NCEA store. And just a broad overview of the structure. So each chapter is pretty methodical in the sense that it begins with a comprehensive review of literature and some best practices out there in terms of current research. We then go into a narrative that describes real world applications. So some of the stories you heard here today are featured in the book, where we have gone deep in interviewing a particular school about their practices. So we call these vignettes throughout the book. And concluding each chapter is a checklist, which enables educators, as you've heard, to think a little bit about those steps for integration. And again, we truly want some of these practices to be integrated, an asset-based approach. We hope that this is helpful as you continue to think about those policies and practices. In 2 more weeks, one of my colleagues, John Reyes, is also hosting a group on April 8th to talk a little bit about the physical domain as well as that ecosystem of the learner. And so we hope you will join him for that. We do continue to have some blogs that are dropped if you're looking for little pieces of our playbook. And then finally in April, I hope some of you will be at NCA Orlando, and I will be there doing a presentation on our playbook as well. So once again, thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it back over to Christy.
Dr. McMahon, Dr. Boyle, Superintendent Oseguera, and Dr. O'Leary, on behalf of everyone here today, thank you for having this important conversation and allowing us to be a part of your important conversation today and sharing with us. Thank you for your dedication in working to elevate academic engagement, social connectedness, and emotional well-being in our schools. On behalf of our Catholic school students, thank you for this important work that you do to help them find balance within the whole child, and giving them the loving experience of God. It's beautiful. And on a personal note, it's a privilege to learn from you the simple reminder, the powerful of mindfulness with prayer and loving God as much as the person we like the least. Really powerful stuff here today. Thank you to all of you. And I see gratitude coming in our chat as well from our attendees. To our online attendees, thank you for being here and for your thoughtful engagement, and CEA values your input. As we continuously work to strengthen service for our members, please take a moment to complete this short survey that is being shared in the chat. For a certificate of attendance, please include your name and email at the end of the survey. Those are sent automatically, so be sure to check your spam folder if you don't receive it within a few minutes. And on behalf of everyone here today, may we continue to build up the kingdom of God by nurturing the whole child, mind, heart, and spirit through our shared commitment to Catholic education. God bless you all, our panelists and our attendees here today, and may your work continue to enrich and transform our Catholic schools. Bye-bye.